Hey guys, I hope you're doing well. Today we're going to be repotting a big plant. It's going to be the Philodendron Patriciae. It's one of our favorite plants. I actually got it in fall of 2021 and now it's almost fall of 2023. So I've had it for not quite 2 years. So if I can, I'll pull up a picture right now so you can see this was 2 months after I received it and rerooted it and rehabbed it after it came in from Ecuagenera. And I ordered from Ecuagenera's Ecuador location. So it shipped from Ecuador to Florida to their distribution greenhouses there. And then they shipped from Florida to me here in Tucson, Arizona. The prices have dropped significantly. It is 3 times less than what it was when I bought it. So it's a great time to buy this plant. And you can order from Ecuagenera's US location too, or go to one of their greenhouses here. It's definitely a beautiful plant, so worth it. One of my all-time favorite philodendrons. Let's get started with the repot, and then I will share all the care tips of how I grew this plant from a baby starter plant to what it is now. Let me see what's happening with the roots underneath here. You got the stick, right?
Yeah, I got that.
Okay. Okay, it has a lot of roots coming out the bottom. I just want to see if it'll release from the pot. So if you tilt it, with the leaves, let me get the leaves off the board there.
Can we just break this pot?
We could. Do you want to break the pot? Oh, okay.
Because I don't want to, I'd rather break the pot than damage the...
Okay.
Try this side now. Oh yeah, those.
Oh.
That thing.
Okay. It looks like it was very happy in the terracotta pot. All right, so there's the roots.
They're fine.
Yeah, it has very fine roots, doesn't it? They're very fine, and so they will dry out easily, and they will get waterlogged easily. But the funny thing is about this plant is it's been one of my easiest plants to care for. This plant is really root bound. Like, this entire thing is just solid, fine roots. Okay, we're gonna take the Philodendron Patriciae outside and hose off the roots, because that's the only way I can think of to loosen up some of these roots. It is so root bound, it's just like a crab cake of roots.
Crab cake.
Okay, this is after pressure washing with the hose on high, like my full blast hose. It barely loosened up the roots. Okay. And I'm gonna start undoing the Velcro. And I think that's the only piece I had on there, right? Yeah. Oh wait, hold on. I'm gonna try to remove the stake. Oh my gosh, it feels like it's really locked in there.
Did it grow onto it or something?
Yep. Oh, you know what?
They might have grown into it, right?
Let's see. Oh wait, we got it. That was kind of a heavy piece of wood. That was producing a lot of weight, yeah.
Especially for that tiny little pot.
Yeah. Okay, so now that there is a hole in there, I can try to spray that out a little bit better.
Oh, you got it?
So yeah, I'm gonna go back out.
You got that? Let me go.
Yep. So the wood stake was right in there, so you can see the roots are more flexible on that side. We weren't able to free up the roots as much as I would have liked, but that's just gonna have to be how it is. I'm actually not gonna worry too much about those roots, because what I wanna do is root it into a moss pole anyway, so I wanna start rooting the stem. So I'm gonna pass this to you and go grab
this gigantic plant with a tiny pot.
I know.
Dang.
Well, it started as a baby. It was a little baby seedling with just like that.
Now I'm looking at it, I'm like, why did you wait so long? It's like this gigantic thing.
I know, I waited way too long. It seemed like it was so happy that I just didn't want to disturb it, but then all of a sudden you could just tell that something was different.
Yeah.
It was like, you
could tell it was just so bound up, it didn't have enough access to more soil. This is my aroid mix, and so I'm using the coarse coconut husk. So these are the cocoa chips, and then I also have the cocoa chips and fiber. But that chips and fiber does have some of the slightly more fibrous, more broken down bits of coconut husk. So that does still hold on to a good amount of moisture, but not too much. It still stays really airy. I've got some chunky horticultural charcoal
and then also the pumice and perlite for aeration, and also some vermiculite that holds onto water, but it also holds onto nutrients. So it's a chunky mix, but it holds onto enough moisture so they don't dry out too quickly, but it still stays really airy, so the roots will have plenty of oxygen. And I've already made my moss pool ahead of time, so it's a sphagnum moss pool, and then anything below the soil line is just more of the aroid soil mix. I'm gonna put that right down to the bottom. Yeah, hopefully this pot is big enough.
That's not big enough. No way.
Well, let's see here.
Because I mean, this is already like half that distance, right? I don't know, it just doesn't look big enough to me.
So
You're crowding the roots already.
let me see. That was supposed to be the pot that worked for it.
What is that black one over there?
This nursery pot.
Put
Here's
this in there and
another
put the
option.
pole in and see if there's...
All right, so
Because yeah, see the pole's going to be like right up against that still, like there. And you need soil on this side, right? Okay, coming
see,
in.
yeah, see if it needs to be, see if I need to add more soil in there.
Yeah.
You know that hole where the original wood
Yeah.
stake was? I'm actually gonna just
fill
refill
that.
that with soil. Just slip that right in at the top here. Let's see how it
There it
lays.
goes.
It's now 1 week later, and I decided I'm gonna go with my first instinct and go with the smaller pot, the 9-inch clear pot, because I wanna keep an eye on the roots, especially because we just switched it from a terracotta pot where it's gonna get lots of airflow, and we're putting it into a plastic pot. I didn't want to go too large with the plastic pot. I'd rather keep it on the smaller side. I like to be able to water my plants freely and not have to worry about root rot. So I prefer smaller pots rather than potting too large. Too large can hold too much soil, which holds too much moisture, and then you can end up with root rot really easily. And this plant seems to really enjoy being a little more on the pot bound side in a smaller pot rather than a larger pot. So I was a little nervous after potting it into that larger one, and I thought, you know what, I don't feel that's a good idea. Let's go ahead and get it into the smaller pot, and then I can use the pot that Michael likes, the white one, as the cover pot for it. All right guys, so this is the 1 month update after repotting it. So the footage you just watched was from 1 month ago, and the new leaf has unfurled all the way now. It's definitely smaller compared to the last leaf. Sometimes that happens. You can get a little bit of stunted growth when a plant is too root bound. Okay, so let's talk about care and how to get big, beautiful, lush leaves on the Philodendron Patriciae, how to grow it, how not to kill it. So, okay, let's talk about pots first. So you can choose a breathable pot that's gonna dry out quicker and you'll have to water more frequently, or you can choose a plastic pot where maybe it's a clear pot and you're able to watch the roots, which is always fun. So Philodendron Patriciae can really grow in a variety of pots. They're not too picky about that. We just have to adjust the size of the pot. They like to grow in a tighter pot, so they don't need too much extra room because they are epiphytic plants. They do grow on trees, so a lot of their energy is focused on wanting to climb up and putting out those aerial roots. So I'm glad I finally got this poor thing on a moss pole. So just understanding that it's not a terrestrial plant that needs lots of soil or wants lots of soil around it. It's an epiphytic plant that is a climbing philodendron that wants to climb up trees in nature. It just lets you know how it likes to grow and that it really enjoys lots of airflow and lots of air circulation. So it works really well to have a free draining soil and to water frequently and let that water be able to flush through the pot and away from the roots. So it wets the roots and flushes away. And that seems to be what keeps this plant really happy. So those fine roots aren't sitting for long periods of time in stagnant, soggy soil. Sometimes I'll also add sphagnum moss to the top of the soil if I want to keep the moisture in the pot. So it comes from a very rainy region of the world. It's the Chaco department of Colombia, which is northwest side, and it's in the rainforest there. So they found that the Philodendron Patriciae in its native habitat there, the biggest specimens were found in the rainiest parts of the rainforest. That's where it grew up. That's where its roots are, is in getting lots of rainfall throughout the year. So when I was growing this in the terracotta pot, I was watering it about twice a week. And now that it's repotted, I'm watering it about once every 5 days. Also, my moss pool's a little bit dry, so I'm gonna add some more water in there.
And I took some saran wrap and wrapped it around the back of the moss pole just temporarily until I get something else to wrap around. I have an idea, but I don't have any supplies for that yet. But anyway, I just used some saran wrap to help lock in moisture into the moss because otherwise it would dry out super fast. And also I'm trying to get the top node to start rooting out with the aerial roots. And I water generously until we have water coming through the drainage hole. Get back here behind the moss pole too. And if I just want to wet the moss and I don't need to do like a full watering, then I can just use my sprayer and just wet the moss down the pole or up at the top. Or if I just need to wet this moss here, I can just turn that on. These rechargeable sprayers are awesome. They make life super easy when you need to wet moss. And also let you know my climate here, like especially if you're new to my channel, you're just seeing this for the first time. I live in the desert and it's very dry here. So outside it's often low teens or even single digit humidity. Inside, it's usually 20% humidity, maybe 25% if I'm lucky. When I first potted this up and I had that wood stake in there, I thought, well, I was hoping that the aerial roots would be able to come out and kind of start grabbing around that. So when you look at the stem, you can see all the nubs that are all dried up, but there's no actual aerial roots that were ever able to come out. So that's one thing I realized about this plant is if you want aerial roots, you do need humidity, but you don't have to have humidity to grow this plant and enjoy a beautiful, lush plant with beautiful, long pendant leaves. Like all of these bigger leaves here, that was all grown in 20% humidity. Okay, hold on, let's take a peek in here. Yes, it did end up breaking through the husk, that brown dried husk that can form on the outside when they dry up. Okay, look for the white tip coming through the dried husk right there. Look at all the dried nubs on the stem. See, I thought that one was gonna be a goner too. I thought I was a little too late to catch that one, but it looks like we got it just in the nick of time before it dried up completely. The moss is lightly damp, so I'm gonna cover that back up. So I'm hoping that that sphagnum moss that I have over the top node will help encourage that latest aerial root to grow and to grow into the moss pole. Now, one of the main key factors for having your plant grow big leaves, beautiful pleated leaves, and holding lots of leaves is lighting. So let's talk light. It wants bright, indirect light. And I know that's like the cliche, right? Like all of the aroids seem to want bright, indirect light. But this plant, it really does want bright light. So anywhere from 600 to 1,000 foot candles, which is high light. But it doesn't want hot light, like direct sunlight where it's going to be heating up on the plant. It can burn the edges. The margins of the leaves are sensitive and they can burn. And you can also bleach out the leaves and just in general stress out the plant if it's getting hot sun on it. But like gentle morning sunlight is fine, you know, coming in the window when it's early enough before the sun is too intense and gets too hot on it. Or, you know, like filtered sunlight. So I've got a Soltech Solutions grow light here. It's the Aspect grow light in the 40 watt. So it's the large size. They have a small that is a 20 watt and then a large 40 watt. So I wanted to give you guys an idea of how far away from the grow light it sits. And it's only been here for less than 2 months. I've been testing it out in this location with this grow light. I'm gonna plug my grow light back in. I just unplugged it while I was filming. So let's get this plugged back in and you can see the lighting that actually is on the leaves here so you get a better idea of how much light it gets. So I want to test it out here and see what kind of results come from growing it under the Soltech light. And then if it turns out that, you know, it doesn't seem to like it as much as growing in front of the window, then I'll move it back in front of our east-facing window in our office. Because I know for sure it loves that light and works well there. So the plant is catching light, but it's not directly under the grow light. It's just kind of off center here. It's about 3.5 to 4 feet away, I want to say. And I do notice a little bit of sun stressing on it, which are those, that blushing of the plant. Those are anthocyanins or, you know, phytophenols, they're plant phenols, so plant antioxidants. It's like its natural sunscreen to help protect the plant. So if it's getting quite a good amount of light, then you'll notice those anthocyanins and that blushing sun-stressed color start to happen on the backs of your Patriciae leaves and on the petioles, usually the top petiole here. So I'm just kind of keeping an eye on that and making sure that that doesn't get too stressed. Because of the weight of these leaves, the natural mechanism
mechanism that is built into the growth pattern of this plant is amazing. The top sheath actually holds on to that leaf while it's still unfurling, while it's hardening off. It holds on to it for quite a while. And then finally, when the leaf is ready to support itself on its own and its petiole is strong enough, that top sheath kind of peels away from it, and then it begins working on the next leaf. It's amazing to watch how the plant supports that new leaf and is so protective over it and supports the weight of it, because each new leaf that comes out has a weight to it. These are quite substantial leaves. I mean, these are small leaves that I have on my specimen, but you can get bigger leaves, and the plant is just naturally has these built-in mechanisms to support each of those heavier leaves that are coming out of the plant. Every time it puts out a new leaf, it's an exciting event to watch the scene unfold, you know. You'll notice some of the tips got a little bit dry because I did have my heater a little bit too close to it, a little floor heater, which kind of dried it out a little bit. So I had to just remember to move that away from it. But it's a pretty tough plant though. Now, if you start to get a yellowing leaf like this one here is an older leaf, and you can see that is starting to yellow. It's still hanging on there. But the reason that's starting to yellow finally is because it's not getting light. It's kind of down here and sort of blocked by all these other leaves now. So it triggers the plant to realize, okay, this leaf down here is taking energy, but it's not producing energy back. It's not able to photosynthesize. So any leaves that are older, that are blocked from getting enough light to be able to photosynthesize for the plant, those will start to yellow and the plant will just cut off. It'll just be like, no, I'm cutting you off. you're taking from me and you're not giving. So leaves tell us a lot about a plant and what's going on with it. So actually looking at this Philodendron Patriciae is like looking at the rings of a tree. You can see the growth, you can see what's happening during that time of its life. Also, I want to show you 3 leaves that are all during the same time period here. Those all came out back to back, and that is stunted. Let me show you on this side, these two here, those are also stunted. So you can see what that looks like when you're not watering it. That's what the plant does when you don't give it enough water. It just stunts the leaves, and then if you underwater for too long, they can be prone to getting pests. And so this is what it looks like when you get spider mites on your Patriciae. So here's all of the spider mite bites. You can see they all turn like rust tone. And unfortunately, I didn't catch it until it had gotten this bad, and they were on the back side of the leaf. Although this plant is not normally prone to getting spider mites. It's a very tough, leathery leaf, and spider mites are not normally attracted to this. Like, this is not the first plant they're gonna go after. They're gonna go after your alocasia, they're gonna go after your calathea, they're gonna pick something else that tastes more like raspberry cheesecake, you know. This one is not their favorite flavor, for whatever reason. You know, it's tough, it's hard to chew, I don't know what's going on. I don't know, this one must taste like salad or something, I don't know. Although if it gets stressed out enough, they will go after it, especially a younger leaf, and this leaf was a fresh leaf, so it was more tender, and so, you know, it was like eating baby greens versus like an old leathery kale leaf, you know what I mean? So they will go after the younger leaves if that's all that's available to them. I haven't ever had any other type of pest on this plant other than spider mites on that new leaf when I was underwatering severely. Now these leaves, unfortunately, I did do some damage to it by putting it at my kitchen sink to water, and the leaf, it would touch the edge of my counter, and it got a little bit damaged from that just by touching the counter. So that's what I mean by the margin of these Patriciae leaves are very sensitive. So that's what happens there if you are brushing against it, or if the sides of the leaves get damaged for any reason, or if it's touching the edge of your counter or the edge of a shelf or something. I mean, in nature, they're not perfect either. Things happen, they get roughed up, the wind blows, there's storms, you know, they get ripped and torn and all kinds of stuff happens. So don't worry if you don't have perfect looking leaves. All right guys, it's been a few days since my last update, and I just have to show you this. We have some new growth. Look at that, we have a brand new root that came out of this side, and it's making its way into the moss pole just now. It just made it through the grid. Crazy how fast that happened. So on this side we had that little nub that came from what I thought was a dried out aerial root, but let's see what's happening here. Look at that aerial root. That one has taken off too. It's still pretty little, but it's getting there.
So this part here that looks like a stick, that's actually an aerial root that tried to grow out, and it ended up going into like an old sheath that kind of protected it, so it got a little bit longer compared to any of the others that tried. I totally thought that aerial root had died and dried up, but look, there was still life in there, and it was able to branch out and produce a new root that is heading straight for the moss pole. And I fertilize all of my aroids weekly. So I use Super Thrive and Super Thrive Foliage Pro, and then also I've been experimenting with adding azomite, so trace minerals, into the soil, and then beneficial bacteria, so that can help the plant uptake those trace minerals. But I won't talk too much about that because I'm still in the experimental phase to see if I notice any changes in the plants. But I can always do an update with any of the soil additives that I'm experimenting with in the future in another video. Thank you guys so much for hanging out with Michael and I today for the repot and then the care tips. And if you're growing a Philodendron Patriciae, or if you want to grow one and you have any other questions that I didn't answer in this video, feel free to leave them in the comments below. Or if you're having a problem or struggling somehow with it, let us know and I'll do my best to get back to you. Or if someone else wants to get back to you, feel free to share tips with each other too. And the more knowledge we can share about these plants, the more joy we can all have growing them in our home. So, all right, I love you guys. Thank you so much for hanging out, and I will see you in the next video. Bye, guys.